Wallaby rugby is one of the proudest, but also most up and down in the sport, I think. Their highs are probably higher than any other team that isn't the Springboks and All Blacks, almost definitely, right? But those two teams have been consistently excellent. The Wallabies have always been very up and down, but one thing we were just saying, right, is they've always had great players. I don't think you could pick out a single Wallaby team that hasn't had a great player in it.
Yeah,
so,
great with a capital G as well, in the context of rugby.
So, somewhere outside, what should we say, Suncorp?
Sure.
Out, on the outskirts of Suncorp Stadium, they have decided to build a Mount Rushmore of 4 Wallaby greats. And they have decided that Wally here is getting final pick, but he wants us to help him decide. So, we are each going to pull out who we think are the 4 greatest Wallabies of all time and try and see if we can reach a consensus that Wally can then pass on to Tim Horan or whoever makes these decisions.
Yeah, this is episode 2 of this series. We did one on the British and Irish Lions, and this is quite different because we are supporters of the British and Irish Lions, and we're going to do this for as many teams as we can from our perspective.
Yeah.
And I think the rule on Squidge Rugby is we like to be biased to the team we're talking about.
That's always the approach.
Yeah, and so we're approaching this as though we're Wallabies fans, even though it's a bit of a weird one in a middle of a Lions series against the Wallabies, but I'm excited for this because we have been long-time appreciators of Wallabies rugby and their style of play and so on. And once again, just in case you didn't see our previous episode on the British and Irish Lions, Mount Rushmore, we're going to pick 4 greats in terms of probably, they don't have to be players necessarily, 4 individuals. Primarily, I think, around their on-pitch contributions, but there can be all sorts of things that contribute to this.
For the team of Australian men.
Men.
Right? So we're looking at teams in particular rather than the nation of Australia.
Yeah.
So the team, the men's Wallabies, right? So we're looking at Wallabies, not Wallaroos. Are the players we're looking at here? We'll look at Wallaroos at a later date. We want to take each team individually as a team rather than as a nation.
Yes, which very much changed a few picks we're making in here. Okay, so pick number 1. Do you want to start or should I?
You can start. You can kick us off.
Okay.
I think there's an obvious first pick. I think there's one guy I'm confident will be on here, and I think the other 3 are fairly up in the air.
Okay. I've kind of randomised my order here. However, this is such an interesting one because I actually had down on my shortlist, I had 8 names that were impossible to pick from, and I've just got 4 here. So I think we could go completely different directions and then try and agree on them at the end. But my first pick, I have gone for David Campese.
Okay.
I've gone for their all-time top try scorer. He's the 2nd all-time top try scorer at time of recording in World Rugby's history of international. Yeah, men's internationals. That is top men's try, second top men's try scorer.
Will eat you.
Yes, indeed. And he was an all-timer, just of a winger as well. He also played in the centres. He also played a little bit of fullback, but an incredible skill set on him. An incredible player to watch, like streaking down the wing. Speed, his kicking game, and also the famous over-the-shoulder pass that he did was world-class. And, I remember once when I was I would have been 19, I appeared as, my rugby club appeared on the background of Rugby Tonight, the old BT Sport TV show in the UK, and they had David Campese on as the guest in that. And undoubted legend of world rugby and was renowned as such in the studio. He came across as a dickhead in that, and he knew absolutely nothing about British rugby. He had no respect for British rugby, and I'd ask him questions about the Premiership, and he'd be like, I don't know, I don't watch this, it's rubbish, kind of thing. And he definitely has a chip on his shoulder, David Campese, but he bloody backed it up on the field on everything he did.
This was it, though,
attack and defence. And I think rugby needs those like sprinter style, like proper personalities.
Yeah, this is the thing about David Campese, is that he was always, and again, I've never met him, but always a bit of a dickhead, right? And when it was on the pitch, he was such a beautiful and glorious player to watch. He said that played with that chip on his shoulder and played with that kind of aggression to his game, which you don't expect from a winger, but like he really brought it, the way he liked to piss people off, he liked to round people and let them know he's
especially in the era of like rugby values dickheads who were like, rugby's for humble upper class gentlemen.
Yeah. And so, like, he flew in the face of all of that, and I love that for him.
Yeah.
It does mean that since he's retired, we now no longer have the beauty on the pitch, and we only have the ugliness off it.
It's
but
true.
That's fine. I think David Campese is one of the greatest wingers of all time.
Yeah.
His ability both to be a player, he's one of the best finishers of all time.
Yeah.
I think if you're picking a team of the amateur era, of maybe we're going like 70s to 95, right? That kind of 30-year stretch or so. I think it's him and Lomu are probably the two wingers you're pulling out as the all-time greats, right? From that like post-war and post like, everything building into rugby being like a big deal into then the professional era. Like he's one of the greats of that period, certainly. One of the greats beyond that. His ability to run support lines.
Yeah.
He kind of like invented a lot of that winger coming off their wing, both playing the ball and looking for work, but also running support lines and getting into positions in midfield to run lines and finish tries. His instincts were exceptional. He gave us plenty of players like in his wake. There are just countless players that are in the Campese mould, in the same way there's so many players in the Lomu mould. I think he's one of the most important wingers of all time. I think he's one of the greatest Wallabies of all time. Now, he would have been absolutely on my list.
Like David Campese was always going to happen,
Yeah.
but he was the first to do it. And whoever was the first to do it was always going to go down as a legend, and he very much was. And as you say, he defined what the typical winger is today.
Yeah.
You look at like players that we praise all the time, like Tommy Freeman, Tommy Bowe, Anthony Watson in this part of the world, all those sorts of players, George North, whoever, right? You would never have any of those guys, Vincent Clair, Damien Penaud, whatever. You'd never have any of these guys in this part of the world if not for David Campese doing it down south.
Yeah, absolutely. Undoubtedly, he was on my list. He's in. David Campese, I think, is in. I think Wally is happy.
There was a part of me that was wondering whether you'd leave him off.
No. I am a big fan of David Campese, the rugby player.
Yeah. And to be fair, you're a big fan of like solid technical back three players.
Absolutely,
as well,
I am. They are my guys. They're my guys. It's them and Argentine wingers.
Yeah,
my two favourites.
Again, half those Argentine wingers wouldn't have happened if not for Campo. So you've got to give it to him.
Okay, I'm going to go for my other safe pick. The other guy I think has to be in here, John Eales.
Yes. Yeah, so, very safe pick. Yeah.
Famously, where David Campese was nicknamed Campo, John Eales was nicknamed Nobody because nobody's perfect. There's a strong argument that even to this day, even some 20 plus years after he retired, he might be the most complete rugby player of all time. He was, I think, you have some players come along, right? And Antoine Dupont at the minute, I think, is like 2 decades ahead of his time.
Sure.
Those players come along, right? Gareth Edwards in his day was decades ahead of his time. Lomu was 2 decades ahead of his time. I think John Eales might have been a century ahead of his time.
Yeah.
I think he is a player who was dropped in from the period where rugby's mostly played by cyborgs.
He played with sliders on.
Yeah.
It's so unfair.
It was ridiculous. So goal-kicking second row, who could distribute, he could pass, he could carry, he was great at the line-out. Literally everything you want from second row, he was perfect at.
Yeah.
And everything else you'd want from a rugby player in general, he was excellent at.
So he is still to this day the highest point scoring forward in rugby union history, in men's rugby union international history, which is quite mad. As you say, he kicked goals. He did it all. He could have played in any position, certainly back then. And again, speaking of what we're saying about Campo, I can't help but feel like he's partially responsible, at least, for the fact that now we look at all forwards and expect them to be able to handle the ball at any level of rugby, not just at international level, because he was so genuinely exceptional at it, where you could have put him at fullback, you could have put him at fly half, but instead you put him as a second row because nobody's perfect.
Yeah. Brilliant leader as well. Brilliant captain. Obviously captained the World Cup in '99.
Yeah. That's the icing on the cake, isn't it?
One of their greatest ever captains. And you think about how Martin Johnson was pulled into the Lions team and potentially an England team, right, by his leadership on its own. John Eales is that, but with everything else on top.
Sure.
Like, I think he is the safest. I think he might be the most nailed into any nation's side here. Of any of these we do, it might be John Eales is like the number one most nailed in of anyone.
Yeah. 100% agreed. He was, the first name that I thought. He's, in terms of what Mount Rushmore as this stands for, like, he's a legend in every guard of Australian rugby, and seems like a really humble bloke off the pitch as well.
Yeah.
Like, what a legend.
So his name is being etched into the side of
Wally
Suncorp Stadium.
is buzzing so far with our picks. We've got a few more. I think this is where we'll slightly.
I think we might have picked
separate.
two different.
Okay. Should I go for another one? I'm going to go with somebody who I look back at him now as one of my favourite players of all time, because he's one of the most skillful players that I've ever seen. And yet that's not what characterises him as a rugby player. What characterises him as a rugby player is leadership and sheer work rate, athleticism, and just bloody mindedness.
Mark Gerrard?
Not Mark Gerrard, unfortunately, as much as I'm glad he's had a mention in this video now. No, a legendary Australia captain, 100+ caps, one of the all-time greats, Michael Hooper, is a phenomenal player. And I feel like he sometimes gets left behind in all-time great conversations. But to me, he encapsulated Wallaby rugby for a decade.
Yeah.
And not just when he was the captain. Obviously, he played alongside David Pocock, somebody who I'm sure we're going to talk about later on, and was one of the greats over the ball. And as I say, he was just so physical in everything he did. And he came through as this young flanker where you're like, oh, I didn't realise they were that quick. And he always played with his socks down, which was kind of like the image of him standing tall, socks down, and just like completely hard as nails, and yet really unassuming in the way he did it, because he played with a big smile on his face and just ran around killing people. And you underestimate him because he plays the ball so well. He's got this great kicking game, his great passing game, and so on. And you think of him as that type of flanker. Then you watch him play for the Waratahs, and he starts murdering people.
Yeah.
He was just an incredible player to watch.
It's unbelievable. He came through before edge forward was a thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like, he just developed naturally, and almost the game fitted around him. That actually he's so good in those wide channels, he's so good at distributing. He can play any role you ask of him. He was a brilliant ball carrier.
Yeah.
Like, his ability with the ball to wriggle through tackles and make ground regardless. One of the great jackalers, a guy who stood up whenever it really, truly mattered. And it's where you think about being left at the 23 World Cup, and I think that was such a stupid idea. Because you put him, even if you're bringing him off the bench in that Fiji game, right, he will make an impact because he loved that Wallaby jersey.
Yeah.
He really cared about it. He was an incredibly passionate guy, and yet also the most laid-back dude. Used to skateboard around, which is a great addition to him. And was generally, I think, genuinely one of the greatest players of the modern era.
Yeah.
He is right up there. I had 3 players vying for one spot, and I went down somewhere different. But the more I think about Michael Hooper, the more I think I agree with you.
We will settle this at the end of the video.
So I'm going to throw out 2 other names, right?
Yeah.
So David Pocock, who you mentioned, probably the greatest jackal threat of all time.
Yes.
The greatest at getting over the ball, at clamping on. You could not move from out there, right?
Yeah. Wally's even doing his impression of him right now, getting over the ball.
You think about that era, right? And it's funny how little time the jackal has been in the game. The jackal is really an invention from just over 20 years ago, right? Like, it wasn't really a thing. It was counter-X, was how you blasted and win the ball back. Then you had the jackal took off. The jackal as a phrase only came into usage around like 2007. People were still explaining it in 2009, right? Around the time that Pocock really came to fruition. And in that way, him, McCaw, and then Sam Warburton and Heinrich Brousseau, the 4 of them really changed the game by being incredibly broad-shouldered and focusing on the jackal, focusing at getting over the ball.
Those are the big 4, aren't they?
I think those 4 players, between them, I was going to say single-handedly, quadruple-handedly, changed the game forever. I think the jackal will forever be an incredibly important part of rugby now. I think it's become the biggest cheer in the stadium outside of points being scored is a jackal turnover.
Yeah.
And that comes as a result of those 4 guys. And you've also got...
It's now one of the most glamorous parts of the game, isn't it?
You've got another guy in the background who I'll get onto, and I am deliberately leaving him out. I think there are 5, really. But Pocock was the best at it. And you look at those guys, right, and Warburton obviously was brilliant at slowing the ball down and getting over it. McCaw had this very all-round game. Heinrich Brousseau was brilliant also at getting over and like ripping turnovers out. But I genuinely don't think anyone has ever been better at winning turnovers than David Pocock.
I agree.
And you look at the way he was able to work with referees, the way he was able to win people over. Obviously, he's gone on to become a politician and really work on that front afterwards. But
I bet he'd still be class at rugby to this day. I wish he was playing in that classic Wallabies series that has just finished.
We did a podcast on the 2011 World Cup, right? And we talked about the infamous quarter-final where a lot of South Africans are still angry with Bryce Lawrence, the referee in that game, because he basically let David Pocock get away with murder, right? And I think realistically what they should be angry with is the fact that David Pocock played it better than their guys. Like, Pocock knew exactly where the referee's line was, and he played to it, and he won countless turnovers. That game was basically entirely him winning turnovers.
It was the most ruthless game of David Pocock's whole career, where, as you say, he played like a proper pest in that. And 90% of the time in Pocock's career, you just looked at him and you're like, oh, he's just technically perfect. There, he crossed the line, or he pushed the line so hard, he was on the verge of crossing it. And he played an absolute blinder. He
was slightly less well-rounded than Hooper, or the next guy we'll get onto. But I think he did have more of an all-round game. He was a good carrier. He had a year in about 2015-16 where he just scored countless tries. He was really good at the back of a maul.
He was.
Which you saw the Brumbies, when he was there, kind of shifted their setup from, instead of the 8 being at the back of the maul, they shifted him in because he was so good at getting off and obviously the long limbs to reach out and score. Just a brilliant all-round player. So him. The other guy I want to throw out, an obvious name, George Smith.
Yes. Yes, one of the greats.
Yeah.
Again, you probably don't get Michael Hooper without George Smith,
Yeah.
do you?
Also another guy who was key in that kind of jackal revolution.
Yeah.
But had so much more to his game. Was just this kind of big, all-action, all-physicality guy.
Oh, what a player.
Could do everything.
Yeah.
Eddie Jones infamously said that it feels like he's covered in spiders because no one wants to tackle him. Just he had that aura about him. And he is just like one of the most complete sevens we've ever seen.
100%.
Right? And he came along before we even knew half the skills that he delivered on were things you wanted from the seven position.
And stuck around long after. Infamously, he won the Premiership Player of the Year aged 38. And he played until he was 39, which is crazy. He could also play in the backs as well, which is a huge thing. Like, that was unheard of, especially in his day. It's rare these days.
Yeah.
And especially in his day, it was crazy that he could play flanker and centre. But also, like, you wouldn't want to play him at centre because he's such a good flanker. He's one of the all-time greats there, but did so much above, like, worked so much overtime, so much above his pay grade in terms of like skill set and everything.
Played in both Lion Series in 2001 and 2013. Like,
that was mental.
And had already been playing for the Wallabies for a few years by the time he got to 2001.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't like that was his debut and then he's back up later. One of the longest Wallaby careers. I think he's like second longest Wallaby career of all time.
Yeah.
Just a true servant as well as a brilliant player. Now, there was a game, right, this kind of handover between the end of George Smith's initial career before he went off to Japan and obviously came back into Wallaby fold, and David Pocock taking that seven shirt from him, right? There was a game against Wales where George Smith was the best player in the park, and then they brought him off at half-time and put David Pocock on, and David Pocock was somehow even better, and they gave Pocock man of the match. But Jiffy was saying, what I want to do is split it between the two, and I want to give it as a joint man of the match for 40 and 40 minutes here, right? And that's what I kind of want to do, is build half George Smith's face and half David Pocock's face. But I know that isn't an option.
No, unfortunately not. Okay, speaking of, I'm going to throw out a couple more honourable mentions here who I've not quite put in. And again, I'm going to go for somebody who I would love to put half of their two faces in here. One of them is the guy that I have, for as long as I've watched rugby, associated with the Wallabies and how they play and their style and their brand and how entertaining they are, and that's Matt Giteau.
Yes.
Matt Giteau is one of the greatest players I've watched in terms of his attitude and his skill set. He's such a fly half, is the thing, and also played at 12 as well, and 9.
To me, he is the guy who sums up Wallaby rugby.
Agreed.
It is that pure skill set, is that immense confidence in his own
said honourable
ability.
mention.
And yet, like, it's never arrogance. It's always just like confidence and belief in himself, and like he just knows he can do this.
And he was kind of the OG of fly halves who just treated rugby as a game.
Yeah.
You know, like you got like Finn Russell's very much in that mould nowadays. You got plenty of them out there. But
he treated it as a game he was brilliant at.
Yeah, he knew how good he was at it.
There was a little bit of a vibe, right? Of, you know, like if you invite your mates round and you've got your PS2 out and you're going to play a game that you know you're brilliant at, and you know you're going to win this, but everyone else is there to have a nice time because they think it's even matching, but like, you know you're the best at Mario Kart, which isn't on PS2, and it caught me out on that, but you're like, no, I know I'm going to win. Like, there was that vibe about Giteau playing international rugby, of him being like, no, but I know I'm the dog's bollocks.
There was... He famously had kind of the chip kick was one of the great things in his arsenal. His length of passing was ludicrous.
The bounce pass.
The bounce pass.
Still referred to as a Matt Giteau bounce pass.
Yeah,
This day,
undefendable.
anyone that deliberately bounce passes the ball.
Yeah. Honestly, like, the sheer level of fly-off and inside centre skills that he had on him were ludicrous. Obviously, played a lot of scrum half as well. A little bit at fullback as well.
Tiny bit at fullback.
At Wallabies level. And finished his career... Well, he finished his career at San Diego Legion.
Yeah. But he,
with Toulon, he was outstanding.
Look at how good he was in the Legends game over the last few weeks.
The try he scored, I'll roll it now, where he scored this, he's aged 42 here, and he's fully taking the piss. The fact he's still got this in his arsenal. The guy's incredible and also just loves rugby more than anything.
Yeah, everyone else knew this game was a bit of a piss about, but he knew it was, and he knew this would be funny if he could pull this off, and it was.
Yeah. I love Matt Giteau.
I love Matt Giteau.
The guy I'm going to halve him with...
We're talking ourselves into putting Matt Giteau in the
Honestly,
team.
yeah, I think... I had him down as an honourable mention, but
I did.
I might turn that round by the end. We'll discuss that later. The guy I'm going to halve his face with for the time being, though, is one of his best mates, Adam Ashley Cooper, who's one of my favourite players of all time. I think he actually is an honourable mention because
I think he is.
some of these guys have a bit more money in the bank than he does, but again, growing up, he kind of defined the utility back for me.
Yeah.
And he also defined the outside centre. His lines of running were just genuinely incredible.
Yeah.
And he played with heart in his sleeve every single game he played, and defensively phenomenal. I love Adam Ashley.
He's one of my all-time favourite players. I
Yeah.
loved watching him. And
I remember when
enormous joy.
growing up, you always said he was like your
He was one of my
favourite
favourites.
player.
He was always
like in the
right up
Southern
there.
Hemisphere, whenever.
Yeah, like always right up there.
Yeah.
His ability to, as you say, hit lines, play the game incredibly technically, yet with a kind of beauty to it, and a kind of effortlessness.
That was some
always loved
centre
it.
combo those two
Always
had as
loved that
well.
there was something slightly boring about him.
Yeah.
You know, you look at the rest of that Australia backline with Quade Cooper, who I don't think we will mention, but like, what a player. Drew Mitchell, Matt Giteau, like, what a backline that was
Digby
there.
Ioane.
Digby Ioane, man, what a player. Mike Harris. And you look at all of those players, and they were all full of such flair and such brilliance. And then Ashley Cooper was kind of the boring dad in the team.
Yeah.
And it meant that he kind of like, he would take a lot of the responsibility. And if ever, you know, they were all being very expansive and free flowing, he would just straighten the line or he'd just take it into contact. But also, he had so much more to him, the way he could run those angles and he could pick those lines. Brilliant player, such a good finisher as well.
Yeah.
Can I throw out a couple of
slap the
mentions?
floor as he's
Yes,
finished the
the
tries.
celebration.
Love that. Yeah.
Yeah. Can I throw out a couple of honourable
hit me.
mentions? Tim Horan.
Tim Horan.
So Tim Horan didn't make my team, but he's very
so
close.
many good Wallabies.
Again, one of the all-time greats.
Yeah.
I think someone we missed out because we weren't watching him in real time.
I think if we were 10 years older, we'd have chucked Tim Horan straight in there.
And this is a problem. But
It is.
you watch him on the highlights reel, you watch him like in terms of defence.
Guy's incredible.
The 99 Wallabies conceded one try in the entire World Cup, and a lot of that was on him being the defensive leader.
Yeah.
Right, and being like one of the truly great defensive centres.
And
as well
leaders,
as
yeah.
So good. Yeah, leader. Attacking wise, Wally has passed out. He's so excited about
He's
this.
disgraced that we've not
He's-
included Tim Horan.
Can I mention? There's another guy right in the background behind him, Jeff Shaw,
Jeff Shaw?
who played in the '60s.
Okay, I
Right.
didn't watch him.
And no, me neither.
Not live anyway.
But was kind of referred to as one of the great Wallabies. Was kind
Okay.
of the inventor of that like Mar Nonu type centre.
Oh, okay.
Who was like a crash ball player, but had like a kicking game and a real distribution about him.
I like
and
it.
he's kind of referred to as like basically set that mold of, instead of just being a big man, had like the complete skill set to go with it, and was doing that
Okay.
again like 40 years before Mar Nonu.
Jeff Shaw just isn't as dramatic a name as
It's
Martin
truly
Nonu.
not. No.
Yeah.
Like no wonder he didn't take off in the same way. Also had an 11-year career, which in the amateur was
Fair
a
play.
long time.
Fair
Like,
play. He sounds like a legend.
Yeah. Another legend who I want in contention, Kenneth Catchpole.
Okay.
So again, played in the 60s, retired in 1968, had a long Wallaby career in that period, and was referred to by, I forget, it was one of the British papers when he came over to play on a tour, was referred to as almost certainly the greatest halfback of all time.
Wow, okay.
Unlucky for him, 1 year later, Gareth Edwards wins his first cap after him retiring and takes that off him. And then there was, in his autobiography, there was a section of his biography of other people, notable within rugby, of journalists and other players, writing about how great he was. And I don't know if that was his decision, or that was like people just being like, can I write something about how great Ken Catchpole was?
Yeah.
But a lot of them compared him to Gareth Edwards and Sid Going as like, oh, he was the guy that started this trend of the truly great nine who did everything, who ran everything. And I think kind of wanted to mention him as an all-time great who is perhaps a bit more forgotten because he was the other guy. You know, it's like the end of Inside Llewyn Davis. If anyone's ever seen that, the like movie about a folk musician who can't get anything to work and he keeps failing and failing and failing. And in the last scene of the film, it's him walking out of a club and Bob Dylan walks on stage.
That's good.
And yeah, he's kind of like that in a way. Of like he was a brilliant talent, but he came just before the brilliant talent.
Yeah.
So no one, knew who he was.
Okay, let's talk about Stephen Larkham.
Let's talk about Stephen Larkham.
Where does he rank in this? I just feel like for most nations, he just walks straight in.
Yeah.
And we're having to contend whether he even makes it in this. One of the all-time great organising tens, as a game manager, as a guy who just knew rugby inside out and had a grip on it, right? Stephen Larkham is one of the greats in terms of that.
As a thinker about the game, as one of those players who came through and wasn't just managing the game in terms of decisions moment to moment, but thinking in the broader picture.
A control freak,
Obviously,
in a good way.
Was a key part of that team under Eddie Jones, who basically pioneered fast ball, the free phase move. You had them thinking about more than just these passes you play in front of you, but thinking about the wider game, right? And I wonder how many tens would have been able to operate in that way, especially at the time. But Larkham took it completely in his stride and was like, yeah, and added so much to it, right?
Yeah.
In terms of his ability to be at the forefront of the game moving forward into what it is now, as well as being one of the most skillful and brilliant and all-round players. Like that kind of gangly pass he had, being so tall and then sending it over the top, and in the kicking game.
They're just always putting it in whatever space
Yeah. Nick Farr-Jones.
Nick Farr-Jones, the
Not
guy
bad.
who lifted their first ever World Cup.
And what a player he was as well.
Watching back that 87 tournament, we didn't have tremendous amounts of positive things to say about it as a tournament. Nick Farr-Jones was one of the players who came out in the most enormous credit. And we were just like, this guy is ahead of his time as a scrum half.
Yeah. And obviously the 89 Lions tour as their captain, their standout player. He is one of the lasting images when you talk about the history of Lions against Australia. It is very much Nick Farr-Jones comes up as their best player, as the guy who stamped on Rob Jones's foot, stole the ball off at the scrums, all of that.
Shit out, love it. But we can't talk about Nick Farr-Jones without talking about his partner in crime.
So this might be who I have in my team. This might be number 4 you're thinking of.
Okay. You talk to me about this guy then.
Mark Ella.
Okay.
Were you thinking of someone else?
I was thinking
you're thinking
about
the previous. Yeah, the other. Yeah.
the other one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I was split here a little bit on who this is.
Okay.
But I think I've gone with Mark Ella.
Okay.
And if you look at the history of the Wallabies, right, one of the most important moments is that 84 tour. And in some ways, I think we want this Mount Rushmore to reflect what they did.
Yeah.
In the same way that Lincoln is on the Mount Rushmore in real life, right, for things he did and what he represented in America, rather than he was a cool dude who wore a great hat. Mark Ella was the focal point of the tour that set Australian rugby in motion. They had been for a period similar to the current one where they'd been down and people thought they were out after the retirement, of a bunch of those players from the 60s who'd been greats, the likes of Catchpole. And they kind of had a period during the 70s where they weren't that hot and they weren't the thing. And then along comes this younger generation led by Mark Ella as the kind of star player who brings this brand new way of playing the game. And that way he'd loop around, kind of almost inventing the Sexton loop way before anyone else. The way he would keep himself involved, the way he played with that kind of genuine arrogance. We're saying that Giteau had this borderline thing where he was incredibly confident. Ella was just permanently convinced he was God's gift of rugby. Yeah. And he played like it. And it was glorious. And I think for the fact that that 84 tour represented the moment Australian rugby came of age and built into the two World Cups they won, I think that is the most important moment in Wallaby history, arguably that tour, where they went and they
kind of
beat
defined how they
England,
play now.
Wales, Scotland and Ireland. Exactly.
Yeah.
It set the mould for how they're going to play. And everything since then has kind of been in the shadow of that tour. And Mark Ella was the star. And I think, obviously, the other guy I think you're about to mention, very much in contention. Yeah. But if you put together, which was actually more influential, was the World Cup win in 91 or the 84 tour? I kind of think it was the 84 tour.
I get you. I think that nowadays there are kind of two stereotype types of fly half, right? One of them was essentially pioneered by Mark Ella, which is where you say, oh, he's a typical 10, he's got his shoulders out, he's just properly full of himself, walks like he owns the place, and that's what makes him so good. That's what makes Dan Bigger, Johnny Sexton, Owen Farrell, all of these fly-offs.
And even though he was a completely different player in terms of the way he played the games of those, it was that attitude, it was that approach to the game.
Yeah. The fact that I am indestructible, I am bulletproof in the way I play. And there are endless fly-halves these days who are like that. And the other kind of fly-half is the student of the game. Is the one who is just settling everything down. You're talking Michael Lynagh.
We are talking Michael Lynagh.
And he's a legend. Again, we looked back at the 87 World Cup and we were just like, oh, this guy's incredible. He just understands how rugby should be played in a way that everybody understood how rugby was being played at the time. Whereas I think Michael Lynagh was pioneering the game and how people think about it and how teams kick tactically. Australia were one of probably two teams in that World Cup. I think New Zealand being the other one who didn't kick aimlessly. Even France, who were really good in that World Cup, did sometimes get bored, and Serge Blanco would just whack it in the air because he just wanted to. Whereas Lynagh would instead go, no, actually, we need to think about possession versus territory and how we're going to play this. And so that combo of Lynagh and Farr-Jones completely settled it down. And because of the influence of those two, they managed to carry a very good Australian team all the way to the one of the all-time greatest games of rugby ever in the semi-final against France.
This is the thing about Lynagh, isn't it? That when you watch rugby from the 80s back now, it feels very slow.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, the average ruck time was something like 40 seconds.
Yeah.
And teams just did, and there were longer stoppages, there were more stoppages because teams just boosted out randomly. The whole game felt very slow. Like things happened in slow motion, teams moved slower. And obviously still had guys who were incredible acceleration, like the Campeses of the world.
Yeah.
But it didn't move at the same speed. Lynagh felt like the one guy who could see it, whose brain was working at the speed of a player today. One of a handful, Grant Fox was also there, there's a bunch of them, Philippe Sella, etc. But it felt like he was looking at this and going like, this is easy, this is so slow.
Yeah.
And he is one of the few players in the 87 World Cup, if you dropped into modern rugby, I think it'd take him one training session, him at his prime, to get up to speed and be like, cool, okay, I get all of this.
My brain is faster than your legs are.
Yeah. My brain is faster than this game is currently.
Yeah.
Like, he was so far ahead of the game.
Yeah. So I have one more name.
Okay.
And this is who I had down as my fourth member. Okay. So first question, before I say who this is, right? Is there anybody more unlucky in the history of rugby to be their nation's third best in their position than Will Genia?
I know, you're right. Yeah.
Because if you're saying that Will Genia is number 3, Farr-Jones is number 2, as far as Australian scrum halves go.
Yeah. Catch pause number 4.
Once again, you talked about rather, Mark Eller, defining what the fly half is now.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody's shaped the scrum half position. I love talking about the scrum half position. You might have noticed it's my favourite thing to do, right? I don't think anyone has shaped that more than 4 more years, boys. 4 more years. George Gregan.
Yeah.
An all-time dickhead on a rugby pitch and had the skills to back it up.
But also a genius.
He's a genius. He was. It was one of those that he would get on the pitch and he would straight away mouth off to the opposition the whole time and get in their heads. And the whole time the opposition package would go like, can someone put a fucking shot on number 9? And he would just slip away from it all times or throw these genius passes or kicks or whatever. I remember so we missed the prime George Gregan career, watching live. When we went back and did the 2007 podcast, when we watched back every game of that, we watched Australia's first game against Japan. We watched that alongside our friends at Draft Rugby, Harry and Nelson. Hello, if you're watching. I'm sure you are.
I'm sure they've got thoughts on this team.
Yeah, and George Gregan came on with 10 minutes to go. 1 minute later, and Australia were 90 points up. 1 minute later, gets into a fight with his opposite man from Japan and calls him a cunt. And it was just like, I love this man.
The best thing is, after that World Cup, he went and signed to go and play in Japan.
Yeah.
He was the first. He led that as well. That's another thing he pioneered. He was the first big name player to go over and play in Japan.
Yeah.
And kind of led to the situation we're in now.
I just think the cockiness he has is what any scrum half needs and what any great Wallaby needs as well.
Yeah. And also his ability to see things on the field, his vision. It's sort of like, there's an argument that in the professional era, there have probably been 3 scrum halves with the vision he's had, right? It's him, it's Freud Dupree, it's Dupont.
Yeah.
Who can see the things they can see.
Agreed.
And see them as quickly as they could.
Yeah.
Yeah, you make a very good point.
So we've got to pick 4 from those. We've picked 2.
So we're happy with Campese is in. John Eales is definitely in.
John Eales, there's no way of removing him.
Are we happy with Campese?
Campese's 80% in.
I think he's pretty much there.
So
that leaves us 2
I'm now,
spots.
because we've named so many players there, I'm starting to question whether Hooper's the right guy.
Yeah.
As much as I had him in there with good reason.
Because I kind of had it in my head that it's one of Hooper, Pocock, Smith.
Yeah.
And I was leaning to the other 2.
But now I'm starting to think it's none of them. And instead, because this is the Squidge Rugby Mount Rushmore, we put Matt Giteau in.
Do we put Matt Giteau in? Do we? I am leaning towards Eller and Gregan.
Yeah?
Have a halfback combo on there.
Okay.
But they've only got 1 forward, and they've
Yeah.
produced Simon Poidevin hasn't come up.
Yeah.
Poidevin, there's so many greats.
Whose son is now playing for the Legion and the USA, of course.
There are so many greats we haven't even touched on, even in passing. Joe Roth we haven't mentioned.
Yeah.
We could be going on Lottie Tikuri, who I don't think is there, but there's so many greats
Totai
we
Kefu.
haven't brought up. Yeah.
There's
Chris Latham,
Justin Harrison, man, the list is
Nathan
honestly
Sharp.
endless. And I'm sure that there are plenty I've forgotten there who are really obvious names.
Dally Messenger, who
James
played
Slipper.
in the 1900s.
Yeah.
And reportedly once kicked the ball so hard that he broke his own leg. Once attempted a goal from his own 22, and when he missed it, said, like, it's fine, I got one in training yesterday, so I backed myself.
Maybe Mark Ella didn't pioneer that kind of fly half.
He spent most of his career in rugby league, unfortunately. So he kind of can't be in contention, but was like,
Okay,
was one of the great Wallabies at the time.
We could take one each from ours.
I would go
How
Ella
locked in
and
have you got Mark Ella?
I could be talked around, definitely.
Yeah.
But I think he represents one of the most important moments in Wallaby history and also one of the archetypal Wallabies.
Ella versus Gitto, in a word.
I would take Ella.
Okay. Gregan versus Gitto, in a word.
Gregan.
Okay. I think we've just locked that in then.
Okay.
Because I'm not going to budge on Gregan. Because I care
like
too
Gregan.
much about the history of the scrum half position
I think I'd lean
to budge on that.
Gregan. I was leaning George Smith as my other pick, but I think I'd take Gregan over him. I think you're right.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, Wally, are you happy?
I think Wally seems pretty happy. He thinks that there's a lot of players who've been quite harshly done by there. He does think that, given it's the Squid Rugby Mount Rushmore, he thinks it's quite harsh on Matt Gitto that we've not picked him there.
Well, we're going to... Okay, in the
because
gift
he's
shop,
our favourite.
The gift shop next to it, we're going to sell lots of Matt Gitto merch.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. Well, Wally is happy with the 4 picks. The question is, are you? Who would you pick in as your 4 players for the Australian Mount Rushmore? Would they be the same as ours? Are we stupid? Have we forgotten someone dead obvious?
I'm sure we have. I'm confident we've forgotten someone really obvious. And we'll look at the comments and go, Totai Kefu. You know,
Stephen Moore.
Stephen Moore, great player.
That was difficult. Yeah, you mentioned Nathan Sharp there, didn't you? Yeah.
God, we could have gone forever. There's so many more we could have done.
We could have.
This is such a hard assignment. Why do we give ourselves this task?
Yeah.
We move on and just do Zebre, so
all right.
we've got a smaller pool to pick from.
Yeah, can't wait to pick Simone Jesse.